If something isn't broken, don't fix it. In Ohio, early voting isn't broken, but they're fixing it anyway. Changes announced this week include no voting on Sunday, ever. Remember Souls to the Polls, that campaign, the literal drive by churches and community groups to take voters to the polls? Well, that's effectively over. Say you want to vote on a weeknight after work. Well, forget it. Early voting now ends at 5 p.m. More than a dozen other states have approved voting restrictions over the past 3 years, and all but 2 are led by Republicans. In Arkansas, the GOP legislature overrode a veto by its Democratic governor, and Rhode Island's governor was, at the time, an independent. But in Ohio, this is a pattern. Last week, Governor John Kasich signed 2 bills, including one cutting 6 days out of early voting. And all of these new rules matter because, and you've heard this before, as Ohio goes, so goes the nation. President George W. Bush won re-election in 2004 in part because of his narrow victory in the Buckeye State. Then Senator Barack Obama carried the state by 5 points in 2008 and won the presidency. In 2012, the president won it again and won another term in the White House. The state hasn't voted with the losing presidential candidate since 1960. Voting matters. Ohio matters. Voting in Ohio matters. And Nina Turner is a Democratic state senator from Ohio and also a candidate for Secretary of State and also my friend. Nina, thanks so much for being here. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Joy, and congratulations to you.
Thank you. And I should mention, we also reached out to Governor Kasich, to the Secretary of State, John Husted, and to several other state officials for their comments as well. They either said no thank you or they didn't get back with us. So let's start with you. You'll be here on your own, Senator Turner. Why do you think there's such a strong push in Ohio now to enact these pretty far-reaching restrictions on early voting?
Well, Joy, as you know, it makes no sense. 10 years ago, the voters of the state of Ohio had to jump many hurdles to exercise their right to vote. Long lines, people waiting in lines for hours. In Knox County, the last voter didn't vote until 4 a.m. The General Assembly, since that election of 2004, corrected that, and that is why Ohio, since then, voters have been able to enjoy early voting, early in-person voting, and absentee voting. So it makes no sense when it comes to being voter-centric why in 2014 the GOP-controlled legislature and the GOP Secretary of State would seek to push policies and directives that put up roadblocks for people to vote. It makes no sense.
And I mean, was there debate about this in the state legislature about some of these changes? Because when we did reach out to Secretary Husted while he declined to come on, he made the point that they couldn't reach bipartisan agreement within the state legislature, and so sort of the hand was forced of the Secretary of State's office. Was there debate about the proper way to streamline and make more efficient the voting process in Ohio?
Well, that's nonsense, first of all, Joey, coming from the chief elections officer. As far as the legislature is concerned, the GOP majority refused to hear the voices of the minority party in the state. And those of us who are Democrats are standing up for all people's right to vote, not just people who lean blue, but people who lean red or somewhere in between, country, rock and roll, R&B. It doesn't matter to us. We want people to have the right to vote. We did fiercely debate these issues, but it fell on deaf ears. And if you look at the votes of the 3 bills that have since passed the General Assembly, all on party line vote, every single Republican in both chambers voting to suppress the vote, and every single Democrat in both chambers voting against those bills. So again, it makes no sense. It's not broke. They're just making up rationale for why they want to suppress the vote in Ohio. We should be doing everything to expand the access to vote. More people who vote, the better the democracy. The better the democracy, the better public policy, the better engagement people have. But what they are doing now is really an attack on the democracy, and we should not stand for it. And especially, as you noted, and many others have, that Ohio is the swing state of swing states.
No, I stay there, Senator Turner, because I do want to bring in Jennifer Farmer, and she's with the Advancement Project and also an Ohio native. So Jennifer, what about that? I mean, these restrictions are very specific, and they do seem to target precisely the kind of voting that is more popular among Democrats. Sunday voting, which is very popular, particularly with African-American churches. And this idea of not having voting after 5 p.m. I mean, this is so targeted. I'm wondering how these restrictions are able to be put in place without some federal reaction.
Well, Joy, this is nothing more than manipulating the voting rules for partisan political gain. As Senator Turner has already spoken and said, these laws are not necessary, and the people who they impact are seniors, students, African Americans, and other people of color, working people. So basically, by shrinking early voting, you're basically telling a working person that you will have to miss work in order to cast a ballot. In a democracy, elections should not be run in that way. And as Senator Turner also said, in a democracy, elections should be free, fair, and accessible for all people, regardless of political affiliation. And in Ohio, we're seeing something that's very dangerous, something that's completely unnecessary. And I definitely think that people across the country who are concerned about ensuring that all people have a right to get to the ballot box should pay attention and should also take action.
But then what action, though, Jennifer? Because I think that is what's sort of frustrating when people look at all of these restrictions being put in place. I mean, in the era that, we celebrate the 50th anniversary of the civil rights era, there were very active lawsuits. There's very active demonstrations. What is being done on the ground to combat these kinds of laws? Is it possible that they're just going to be enacted and the only thing people can do is make sure to get out on Saturday, make sure they get the right ID? Is that all people can really do?
Well, it's ironic because in 2012, when Secretary of State Husted moved to do similar things in terms of restricting Sunday hours and early voting, a federal judge ordered him to ensure that people were able to vote the Sunday before the elections. So it's almost like he's begging for lawsuits, or he's begging for intervention. I think that the people in Ohio, there are a number of organizations that Advancement Project works with, the Ohio Organizing Collaborative, the Ohio Fair Elections Network, a number of groups are looking at this and are examining and analyzing exactly what can be done.
And I want to bring that last question to you as well, Senator Turner. What is being done on the ground in Ohio? The National Democrats actually are launching a program right now around the country to try to increase access to the ballot. But what's being done to combat these restrictions within the state of Ohio?
Well, those groups that Jennifer named are activated right now. We have our faith-based community that is very activated because of the Souls to the Polls, in particular, the whole notion that people would get together after church on Sunday and go to vote. The Ohio Democratic Party is going to file a lawsuit. They're going to go to a federal court to have the 3 voter suppression bills that just passed over the last 2 weeks enjoined. And over the last 5 years, the ODP has not lost one case. This lawsuit is going to be filed on behalf of every single voter. So yes, we have the courts, but we also, Joy, have the power of the people. And when everybody gets together and really analyzes that this is against democracy, that over 400,000 working class men and women in the state who are either unemployed or underemployed need the opportunities to be able to participate in early voting, when the grandmother who needs the opportunity to participate, or the single mother or single father, this is really about us as Ohioans being able to exercise our fundamental right to vote. I believe that Ohioans are going to side with the right side, and that is making sure that we expand and protect the right to vote. And Joy, we will not relent in this state until we make sure that every single voter, eligible voter, has that unfettered access to the ballot box that they deserve.
All right. I wonder if the Arizona example, what we just saw with that bill restricting LGBT rights, if that will be instructive to people all over the country, including in Ohio. Thanks very much to Ohio State Senator Nina Turner and the Advancement Project's Jennifer Farmer. Thank you both.